Now, when we're thinking about the way that organisms interact with each other, mainly it's through eating each other. And so we often look at what's called a food chain. And a food chain really shows the transfer of energy through an ecosystem. So we can start over here and see that in this food chain, we start with a producer, and that's grass, and it's going to be producing its own food from the sun. And then that energy will follow this arrow. So it will go along the direction of the arrow to these insects, to a grasshopper. The grasshopper will then, the energy in the grasshopper will then be eaten by, this beetle. The energy will then go up to the frog, who will then eat the beetle, but then the frog will be eaten by the snake, and the snake will be eaten by the hawk. So we can see that the energy, which was in the producer at the start, travels all the way through the food chain to the top of the food chain. And here's another example of a food chain. So this is a marine food chain. You can see that there's these very small marine organisms at the start, and then it goes through to bigger organisms which eat them, and then bigger fish eat them, or little crabs, and then slightly bigger fish, even bigger fish, and then the top of the food chain, the top predator is a shark in the ocean. So food chains show the movement of energy through an ecosystem. I've got another one over here, and this is a real example of a food chain which is found in a lake. So blue-green algae is the producer organism. The next level on the food chain, it's actually called a trophic level. So the first order consumer, the next level on the food chain is called the next trophic level, is a native water flea. The next level is this shrimp. The next level is a yellow perch, and the last, so this top order consumer in this ecosystem, and this food chain is a rainbow trout, and the energy travels up that food chain from organism to organism. But of course, we know if we look at a lake, we know that there's not just 5 organisms in the ecosystem. We know that there's a lot more organisms in that ecosystem. So while we talk about food chains, in reality, what we find when we study ecosystems is something called a food web. And so here we have a food web of that same lake. And we can see, our original ecosystem, our original food chain is there, but now there are lots of other organisms involved, and they're all interacting. Lots of them are eating lots of other different organisms, and they're all interrelated. And it's all, it's really important that we kind of maintain that for the stability of the ecosystem. But again, we can think about the trophic levels of this food web, and the organisms down the bottom, well, they're the producers, and then we have the first order consumers, the second order consumers, the third order consumers, or the tertiary consumers, and then the top of the food chain is our top order predators, or the quaternary consumers. So, as we go up the food chain, we end up at different trophic levels, and depending on how far up depends, how far up the food chain we are. So that's really all about food chains, but of course, a food web is really a collection of all of the different food web is a collection of all the different food chains in an ecosystem.